like to bring up Joni Whelan from the director of the Hendricks House Group, co-founder of HEAAT. We're going to do a little show tonight on human trafficking right here in New Jersey.
That works. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I using this?
This will click your phone right there.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. HEAAT stands for Helping Educate, Advocate Against Trafficking, Human Trafficking. Let's see if I can get this right here. Wrong one. How do I move this forward? The middle button?
I am not certain, but we'll see which one does it.
Okay. How many people have heard of human trafficking? How many people have heard of human trafficking right here in New Jersey, happening right here in New Jersey? Good, I'm glad to hear that, because a lot of people haven't. A lot of people hear of international human trafficking. I'm going to be talking about domestic human trafficking. That's what's happening right here. Labor trafficking is another form of human trafficking. Sex trafficking, which is what also I'm going to be talking about, the domestic human trafficking. And CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children. That's what we focus on at HEAAT. That's who we work with mostly. And debt bondage is just another form of human trafficking. Child labor, involuntary domestic servitude. They're just all different forms of human trafficking. The objectives tonight are that as a result of this presentation, you'll understand about the crime of domestic human trafficking and its victims, and learn why New Jersey is considered a prime location for human trafficking. You'll learn the effects of human trafficking on New Jersey's children. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is a crime against humanity. It involves an act of recruiting, transporting, transferring, harboring, or receiving a person through a use of force, coercion, or other means for the purpose of exploiting them. Every year, thousands of men, women, and children fall into the hands of traffickers in their own countries and abroad. Every country in the world is affected by trafficking, whether as a country of origin, transit, or destination for victims. This is just going right through. We usually don't think about Americans' children being sold, Americans trafficking Americans. Think about the women, the girls, and the boys that you've seen out late at night on the streets when you're coming home from work or a social event, dressed in short dresses and spiked heels. Most of the people turn their heads and look away, not wanting to look into the faces of these young children and young women. These are girls and boys who are forced to work out in the street. To fully understand sex trafficking in the United States requires an open mind and letting go of what's shown on TV. You have to let go of the media's portrayal of the joys of prostitution shown in the music videos and open your eyes to the violence and control that the pimps have over them. Sorry, folks. Let's try this again. Maybe if I hold it, it's safer. These are some of the recent headlines. Pleasantville man pleads guilty to forcing teen into prostitution. When asked to explain what he did, this 24-year-old guy said to the judge, "Well, all due respect, sir, what I am is a pimp, and she was my hoe. I tried to make her prostitute herself so I could make money." Voorhees man charged in Deptford. This was very recently with human trafficking. The woman said she'd been held against her will for a week. She'd been forced every day to perform sex acts on many men for money. That's what she told the investigators. And a Newark man charged with running prostitution business in Atlantic City and other Jersey counties. So for what are people trafficked? For prostitution, and I've mentioned most of this before anyway. But what you need to remember is the supply and demand. As long as there's a demand, there's going to be people who are going to continue to be exploited. New Jersey's ripe for human trafficking. Why? Location, it's a prime spot, the I-95 corridor. We're going up and down. And it's easy access, using one of its major interstate routes or airports, seaports, and terminals. Again, this is what I told you I'm going to talk mostly about. The commercial sexual exploitation of children. CSEC, it's called. One of the survivors wrote that it's not a choice. No one just wakes up and wants to do this. And you can't just walk away. So, CSEC comprises sexual abuse and remuneration in money, goods, or services, or the promise of money, goods, or services to the child or a third party or persons, defined by an element of organization and or intent, and or the context of the commercial sex industry. The child is treated as a commercial and sexual object. CSEC is a form of violence against children. At least 100,000 to 300,000 youth are at risk for becoming CSECs annually in the United States. Let me tell you about how I was introduced to human trafficking, way back in 1989. I'm a licensed clinical drug and alcohol counselor. So my whole experience was working with drug addicts and their families. Back in the mid-'80s, I started a group for young children of substance abusers. And I got referred, a 13-year-old girl came to me from a judge because her mom was in jail. Her mom had numerous drug charges and dealing charges. And she was in jail when this little girl was born, 13 years old. And one of the things that we would ask the kids to do as a group activity was draw an inside-outside picture. How does the world see you on the outside? And then how do you see yourself on the inside? This little 13-year-old girl, this is her outside picture. This is how she said the world saw her. Have you ever met kids who are like whiny and mopey and not a whole lot of fun to be around? That was this little girl. But then she showed me her inside picture. Turns out that this little 13-year-old was a chronic runaway. Grandma was raising her. Grandma was a very tired baby. Again, her mom was in jail. Since her birth, her mom's been in jail. But mom had a boyfriend. And this boyfriend would give grandma a break. And he would take this kid away, sometimes for a couple of hours to give grandma a break. Sometimes for the whole day, and sometimes for a weekend or more. Where he took her was to shooting galleries and crack houses, and he would exchange her for drugs. That is human trafficking. This little 13-year-old girl, and the reason that I show her pictures because she'll never have the opportunity to tell people what her trafficker did to her. Because at age 16, she died from AIDS. From all of the abuse that she'd gone through as she was being trafficked by her mom's boyfriend. And that's how I got started with human trafficking. And today, most of the people that I personally work with are still children of substance abusers who are being trafficked by their parents or their parents' siblings. Boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. The average age of entry into, and it says prostitution, but let me tell you, legally, anyone under the age of 18 cannot be a prostitute. Anyone under the age of 18 is a human trafficking victim. And this says that the average age of entering into it for girls is 12 to 14 years old, and for boys, 11 to 13 years old. The National National Incident Studies of Missing, Abused, Runaway, and Throwaways estimates that 1.6 million children run away from home every year. 1 in 3 teens will be recruited by a pimp within 48 hours of leaving their home and becoming homeless. But let me tell you, not all of the kids that we work with are homeless. I've got a girl that, she was in 9th grade, and she went to a party. And some of the guys at the party, they had alcohol there, they were drinking, slipped a date drug into her alcohol. And 3 of them raped her. And a 4th one videotaped her. So Monday in school, the kids showed her the videotape. And they said, excuse my language, but this is what they told her, "You're our bitch now. When we call you, you'll come." So she lived at home, and her parents had not a clue what was going on with her. But when the phone rang, she had to go. If it was 3 o'clock in the morning, she went out the window. Because these guys threatened that they would put that videotape on the internet and make it go viral so everybody would see it. Multiple studies estimate that 70 to 90% of sexually exploited children have a history of child sexual abuse. They've already been victimized, they've already been traumatized. They're not whores, they're not sluts, and they're not criminals. They're victims of a crime. They're children being exploited by adults. The language that you use matters. Factors influencing demand, the internet pornography. There are over 100,000 sites offering illegal child pornography, and hundreds of thousands more offering legal, teen, or barely legal pornography. In 2006, there were over 20 million searches using the word teen porn or teen sex. There's an estimate 300,000 C-sex victims in the United States. Who do you think's buying our kids for sex? The 22% is age 40 and over. The orange cover is 18 to 30. And the huge percentage, the 44% over there, is ages 30 to 39. Buying children for sex. Why do you think that our society doesn't address the demand more? Why don't we arrest the Johns more? I believe, this is my personal opinion, that their names and photos should be in a newspaper and social media. You know, let their families know what they're doing. Warn other families to keep your kids away from these people. But they get a slap on the wrist. And in a lot of places, the kids are still being victimized because they're being thrown into juvenile detention. We work a lot with Atlantic City Police Department. A lot of the kids are in Atlantic City. And I've got to tell you, the people down there on the police force are fantastic. When they do a raid and they even suspect somebody is under the age of 18, they call in to have somebody come in and get the kids and get them safe, to get them out of that environment. Most police departments do not do that. Some of the pathways in the domestic human trafficking. Survivor wrote, "Growing up for me was a lot of pain. I don't know how to explain it. It was just a lot of pain." Children at risk for recruitment into domestic human trafficking are children who are under 18 years old, walk to school or to the store alone, own or have access to a computer. Internet pornography and internet recruiting of these kids is going through the roof. They're attracted to consumer goods, desire to develop romantic relationships, sometimes feel insecure, feel misunderstood, fight with their parents, sometimes feel their parents don't care. They want more independence and test boundaries and take risks. So according to this, who do you think is at risk for human trafficking? Almost any kid on this earth, right? Any kid around here anyway. So some of the ways that recruitment happens, parents selling kids, I told you that's mostly who I work with. Violence and force, that's the little girl I told you about at the school. Kidnapping, seduction and coercion, false advertising for modeling, acting, or dancing. A friend of mine who's involved, she just wrote a book called Walking Prey. She's a survivor of human trafficking. She was picked up at age 14 at the Hamilton Mall down on the Blackhurst Pike. She was having some sodas and stuff with her friends. And this guy came up and said that he was a modeling agent. And he could also get her into movies with Julia Roberts. If she would meet him, and he would take some pictures of her and do a portfolio. So 14 years old, she got picked up at the Hamilton Mall, and a week later was sold at the Hamilton Mall. Peer recruitment. You know, the pimps are getting so sophisticated now, they actually send the young girls back to school. They'll sign them up in middle schools or high schools so they can recruit other kids to come join them. So that they're sending them in to, you know, go tell your friends, go make friends with other girls or other boys in there and tell them that your boyfriend's got a place to live, you can come party there, you can have a good time, he'll buy you clothes, let you drive his car. They're recruiting. Kids are recruiting kids. And again, the internet. Understanding the impact of domestic human trafficking. It's an emotional thing when you're in your life. It's an emotional thing when you get out. I'm struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Every night I have flashbacks. It's hard to sleep. It's from a survivor. These are just some of the spiritual impacts, the physical impacts, social impacts. I'm not going to read all of these because we'll be here all night. But give you a chance to take a look at some. You know, if you look at some of the physical impacts, they get sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV, like the young girl whose self-portrait I showed you. If the violence and abuse are this severe, why don't the kids just leave or call out for help? Do you have any idea? Absolutely, they're threatened. They're scared to death. If you were going to brainwash somebody, make a person compliant, loyal, and too afraid to run, what would you do? Here's what some of the pimps do. They make threats, monopolize their perceptions, and they degrade them. Usually what happens, when they get the kids into their place, whether it's an apartment or it's a hotel room or wherever it is, a basement, the kids are beaten, the kids are raped, the kids are drugged, and then they're sold. And then when they come back with some money, sometimes the pimps will tell them things like what a good girl they are, or what a good boy they are. Because there are boys that this is happening to also. Try to imagine constantly having to lie about your age. All of your identification is taken away. You have to change your name. You're constantly moving wherever someone else wants you to go. You might have been kidnapped, being raped repeatedly. Remember, these kids are not willing participants. Being beaten for not making enough money, having to give all the money you make away, having threats made against your family, having to completely change your appearance, getting a tattoo on your neck with the name of your pimp. Sometimes they tattoo them, sometimes they brand them so that they know who they belong to. Constantly being threatened with violence, living with a group of people you call family, but you could never depend on for support, feeling trapped in an abusive and violent situation, not being allowed any contact with the world outside of your abusive situation, not being able to make contact with men other than the one who abuses you, having to call a man who's not your father, who abuses you, dad, being punished and beaten when someone else breaks an abuser's rule, having to meet a nightly quota based on how much money you make for having sex, having to compete for attention from your abuser with 5 other girls, having sex with multiple strangers every night, getting a sexually transmitted disease, including HIV, getting arrested again and again, having to trade sex with a police officer in exchange for not getting arrested, being beat up, possibly raped by a group of 5 pimps for looking one in the eye. And you're only 13 years old. don't they run away? Trauma bonds. You might have heard of Stockholm Syndrome. You know, that was pretty big a while back, the Stockholm Syndrome. Well, that's what we call trauma bonds. And trauma bonds, it's the presence of a perceived threat to one's physical or psychological survival and a belief that the abuser will carry out that threat. You know, these guys are telling these kids, I will kill you, but first I will kill your family and you will watch me kill them. They believe it because they may have seen him kill somebody. The presence of a perceived small kindness from the abuser to the victim. You know, they might take them out for their favorite meal. You know, McDonald's, Big Mac, and French fries. Isolation. The pimps try and keep them all to themselves. They don't want to mingle them with anybody outside of what they call their family. And a perceived inability to escape the situation. You know, we got one of the kids into foster care with a licensed treatment foster parent, somebody who was specially trained in how to deal with these kids. And we got a kid rescued and got him into foster care through DIFAS. And she called her pimp. And the pimp came and got her and said, come on, bitch, you got work to do. And took her right out of the foster home. And the foster parents, even though they've been trained to deal with this population, they were like, why did she call him? Because she was terrified if she didn't call him, he was going to go get her family. And they were going to be killed. So how are trauma bonds displayed? Positive feelings by the victim toward the abuser or controller. Yeah, it's the only person in their life that they think is going to protect them. Negative feelings by the victim towards family, friends, or authorities. You know, remember, some of these kids are runaways. They have not been in a happy home. A lot of these kids have been sexually abused at home. Support of the abuser's reasons and behaviors. You know, they convince them that I'm doing the best for you. Positive feelings by the abuser towards the victim. Being kind to them once in a while. Supportive behaviors by the victim, at times helping the abuser. Like I said, they go in and recruit other kids sometimes, go into the schools. Inability to engage in behaviors that may assist in their release or detachment. Now that speaks for itself, it's just the fear. And who can suffer from trauma bonds? Abused children, battered and abused women, prisoners of war, cult members, incest victims, criminal hostage situations, concentration camp prisoners, controlling, intimidating relationships, and our kids, C-sex. This is somehow the same thing in there again, just written differently about the trauma bonds. Victim identification and engagement. Survivor said, I needed someone to talk to me. Like, everyone makes mistakes. To tell me, you know, it's going to be okay. I'm better than that. Physical and sexual violence are the everyday reality of these kids. And may leave visible signs of abuse, such as unexplained bruises, black eyes, cuts, marks. Anyone here work in the school system? Because a lot of our kids are still going to school. And people aren't even questioning some of the bruises that they're coming in with. Exhibit behaviors including fear, anxiety, depression, submission, tension, and their nervousness. They exhibit hypervigilance or paranoid behavior. Sexually exploited children and youth often express interest in or are in relationships with adults, with older men. Evidence of controlling or dominating relationships, including repeated phone calls from a boyfriend or excessive concern about displeasing partner. Unexplained shopping trips or possession of expensive clothing, jewelry, or cell phone could indicate manipulation of an exploiter. They're not in control of their own money. Use of lingo or slang to talk about the life among peers or referring to their boyfriend as daddy. Secrecy about their whereabouts. Unaccounted for time, vagueness concerning whereabouts. Defensiveness in response to questions or concerns. Keep them late night or unusual hours. a tattoo that he or she is reluctant to explain. That goes back to the tattooing or the branding that the pimp might be doing. Wearing sexually provocative clothing can be an indicator. But it should be noted, so as not to rely on stereotypes, that not all children in the commercial sex industry wear such clothing. Sexually provocative clothing is not a warning sign in and of itself. Wearing new clothes of any style or getting hair or nails done with no financial means to do this independently is a more general indicator of potential sexual exploitation. Most sexually exploited kids have been trained to lie about their age. Sometimes a child's appearance and their actions can be contradicted, can contradict information they give. So if you're talking to somebody that you think might be a victim of human trafficking, they're not going to tell you if they're underage. They're going to lie to you. So look for some of these signs that we've talked about. Personal information, you know, their age, their name, date of birth, might change every time they tell their story. They have no identification. You know, the pimps don't want them getting locked up and being returned home. So they can't have identification with them because they make up names and addresses where they belong. Has explicitly sexual online profile. I had a foster daughter, and I had to go in and check her Facebook. That was part of the requirements of being a foster parent, a licensed treatment foster parent. I couldn't believe some of the things that her friends were posting on there. And it turned out that a lot of her friends were involved in human trafficking. So keep an eye on what your kids are posting too. Excessive frequenting of internet chat rooms. Again, it's internet stuff. Sometimes you'll see it in their drawings or their poetry or how they express themselves creatively, like with the music they listen to. And if kids got multiple STDs, you know something's going on. Homeless or runaway. Kids living in group homes and youth shelters are targeted and often exploited. Truancy or tardiness from school could be a sign. Family dysfunction is a high risk. So have you ever initiated a conversation with a child about domestic human trafficking? What did you say? Or what would you say? Any ideas? Kids need to know how to protect themselves. They need to know how to stay safe. If you have children in your life, you need to tell them if an adult approaches you and promises you the moon. You don't go and you come home and you tell us about it. You go to make sure if there's a cop there, you go to a cop. Teach them to be safe so that they don't get sucked into some of this stuff. Let them know that it's happening. Kids don't know that it's happening. I was at my doctor's one day and we were talking about it. And she was saying about how her daughter and her friends, they had a weekend thing in Atlantic City. And how they were out walking the streets. And she said they had on real low-cut skirts. That terrified me. Because that's who the pimps are looking for. Thank God she spotted her kids going out the door looking like that and made them get back in the house and it changed. So time to rethink this. You know, a lot of adults think it's okay to go to strip clubs, support the porn industry, attend wild bachelor parties, think it's okay to pay for sex. These things put your daughters, your sisters at risk for domestic human trafficking. So we need to rethink those things. 10 things you can do to help. And in the handouts that I gave you, that list of 10 things you can do to help is right in there. It's a human trafficking hotline. You can also call the New Jersey abuse line if you suspect it. And remember, you don't have to know that it's happening. That's not your job. But if you suspect that it's happening, call. Call the New Jersey Human Trafficking Hotline or the Child Abuse Line. And just say, this is what I suspect. You don't have to give your name. It's all confidential. But call. So if something you see doesn't feel right, if you think it just might be this trafficking, report it. And here's some resources. And of course I put HEAT at the top. If you're looking for us, remember there are 2 A's in HEAT. We are the HEAT Foundation. There's some other resources there that you can check out. And then just a flyer that's available through Missing and Exploited Children. Raise awareness. Tell 10 friends and spread the word. Power of 10. Slavery exists. There are more slaves in the world today than ever before. Ever before. You know, people think that Lincoln did away with slavery. No. There are more today than ever. So help spread the word. Let people know that this is going on. Tell 10 friends. Thank you for caring, and thank you for inviting me tonight.
Thank you.
Question?
Is there a number, phone number for contact in other states? Because I'm going to be putting this out on YouTube and on all the Facebook groups in the state.
There's a national hotline that I didn't put up here because I just put New Jersey in. But you can call the New Jersey hotline and they will give you the number to any state.
Do you have the national number so I can put it into the video?
I don't have it with me, I'm sorry.
Okay. The other question is, this organization, are they pushing for stricter and much longer term of incarceration for these victims?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because certain things like this to me seem like it's almost as bad as attempted murder, and these people really are scum. They should just be put away for life that are taking advantage of people like this. And
Absolutely.
we should be going after the politicians to make them more aware of it,
Yeah.
to push for longer prison sentences.
Absolutely. And let me tell you something, the New Jersey Attorney General has made this one of his priority focuses. One of the very first things he did when he got into office, the next day he was at a Human Trafficking Awareness Day program. Let me tell you a little bit about HEAT, okay? HEAT started, the agency that I helped found, we started because a lot of us, some of us were DIFUS workers. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. There was a child advocate. We saw what was going on, and there was nothing to help the situation. So we started a nonprofit called HEAT. We are 100% volunteers. Everyone that works with HEAT is a volunteer, not paid a penny. Every penny that we raise goes directly to helping the survivors and the victims of human trafficking. So save the date, September 12th, we're doing a fundraiser at the Absecon Methodist Church. We call it Party with a Purpose. And there's going to be all kinds of baskets being auctioned off. There's a DJ there. But every penny that we raise goes directly to the victims and survivors. Yes?
Well, back in the 70s, I had a job in Canyon by the bus terminal. And I used to see the pimps hanging at the bus terminals, just for
Right.
girls, runaways, and they know how to pick.
Absolutely.
We used to sit there on a job and look across the street and see how they would get close to a young 13, 14, take them to get something to eat, build their confidence up. I seen it like back in the early 70s. I said to my buddy, I said, you know, you like to go over there and put a gun to their heads, these guys, I swear. And this stuff goes on. It seems like our government just don't give a damn just about their pockets down in Washington.
Yeah.
That's all they care about, their pockets.
Yeah.
What happened in their door would be a whole different ballgame.
Right. For the longest time, there was no money coming for domestic victims. It was all for international victims.
Yeah.
If you were an international victim of human trafficking, they would even bring your family from whichever country you were taken from here to be with you. And our kids were put in foster care, if that, or juvenile detention. Now, at least, the laws are changing. Some of the politicians are getting on board. They're recognizing that something's got to be done. We're fighting real hard to make sure that the pimps are doing time for what they're doing. We want the Johns to have to do time for what they're doing.
Yeah.
All that stuff you put up there, which was all horrible, the thing that got me the most was where you have one up there that says, parents selling their kids. How often does that happen? And what do we do when we catch those parents? They ought to be shot immediately.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of that, or what's that really all about?
If one is too many, but that's the population that I work with. The children of substance abusers. Now, some of those are adults now who were trafficked by their parents as a child. Now, I've got a girl now that she's in her mid-20s, but her mom began trafficking her at age 4. And the mom participated in the trafficking.
What kind of parents are they?
Drug-addicted
Drug
parents.
addicted, they wanted the money, they sell their kids to get the money to shoot up.
Yeah, exactly.
They do.
But
Are these where the parents are selling their kids doing this? Are they more prevalent in the inner city areas, or is it basically equal all throughout?
all over.
We're here in this town, probably.
That's right.
So it's making no difference of financial or location?
No. No prejudice whatsoever.
How can we learn how to do something similar to what you do? Because what you cover here is great, but it's only information that is, we hear it and then it's not put into play.
That's why I put resources in your packet that I gave out. You can contact any of those agencies and say, what can I do to help? Yeah.
Connie, do we have links on our website to these?
With your permission, we will post the information from your PowerPoint on our website
Absolutely.
with active links and, okay.
Absolutely.
Yep, we can make that happen.
Thank you.
I will also have this video done later tonight. I'll be emailing it to you so you can, and posting it on Facebook and all that, so everyone can take it and share it to your friends. In your emails, on Facebook, if you Twitter, because this is something that we need to make viral, and this is something that the conservative Tea Party movement, I think, is excellent at. So I will have this presentation available late tonight and be able to get the information out probably tomorrow, if not tonight, tomorrow afternoon, because I'm going to be at the Voice Over New Jersey meeting also.
Fantastic. Can I get a copy too, please?
Yes. You just give me your information after.
You know, I sit here and I see this thing you come up and you think of the person's minds that would do this corruption. I mean, it blows me away. And I think, you know, God, you know, you think of Jesus Christ and what he died for, and look at the situation we're in today. I mean, children, government, you name it. I tell you, I think we're in the last days. I mean, the whole world's going to hell.
Did you see the news thing about the DuPont heir?
Oh yeah, he's a real. How about the other one?
He raped his 3-year-old baby.
And they let him go.
Yeah, because he couldn't handle going to jail,
Yeah,
like
he's
anybody else can.
Yeah, you'll go to jail if you ain't got nothing. He's got something, he stays out.
Yeah.
Like anything else, don't kill him in jail though. It's like that one guy they killed in Camden County. He did something, who was it? They beat him to death. Oh no, that guy that did, yeah, it was that guy that did on him, Jeffrey Dahmer. He got his lunch. You know, when you go to jail, them guys don't go for that, a lot of them guys in jail. If you're a child abuser, they'll kill you. That's the only good thing, I guess, about prison. Them type of guys will kill them guys.
In the back here?
Yeah, you know, this might be a dumb question, but I guess a lot of this is like Craigslist and all of that stuff that they track. Just a dumb idea. So we just talked about something on viral. What if you just blew up their phones? If there was a group of people on a Friday night that got together and said, these look like exploited children. Let's just blow up the phone so that they can't work. I mean, does that help? Does that put her at more risk because the kid's angry?
I don't
If you
know.
call
I've
the-
never been on Craigslist, so I don't have a clue how that would happen.
If you called the hotel, where if everybody discovered where they were at, called the hotel and said, you know, you have an underage girl there.
It's best to call the cops and let them handle it. And let me tell you something, when Super Bowl last year, not the most current one, but the one before, our kids disappeared. All of a sudden, we couldn't find our kids that we normally see on the streets. They were put into vans and shipped down to the Super Bowl to work. So when we found out the Super Bowl this year was in New Jersey, we started working. We did all kinds of work with the police departments, with the hotels, letting them know what to look for, and pimps actually got arrested.
Yeah, that was out on the news that weekend was probably the biggest for child pornography around the Rutherford area, and the police were rampant in the area looking for that.
That's right. Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, that's Jim Bev in the back here?
You said that it doesn't help to do anything to the Johns. There's nothing, no legislation or pressure in the people who pay for this?
That's exactly what we're doing. That's what he was
Oh,
doing.
Oh, okay, you are trying to, okay.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, are you going to the legislators of the state of New Jersey,
Yes.
the Assembly and the Senate and so forth?
We go to
Well,
anybody who will open their door to us. And some of the doors we have to kick a little bit, but we get them open. Mhm.
Well, I commend you on the job you're doing. It's a lot of dedication to your work.
Thank you.
Anything else, Karen? Up, Ben?
To finish up on that, with the,
Of course, HEAT, that's us. We can always use help. That's the first one.
Which is the best.
We're the best. HEAT.
That's it. Yep, go ahead.
are you finding that the legislators are not aware of this, and are they surprised, or is there any kind of feedback from what's happening with them?
They're becoming aware.
Okay.
They're not there yet.
Certain areas you're going into the legislators, or?
Well, it's not just us. Polaris is a statewide human trafficking agency that's hitting everybody that they can get into. So we hit the state, we hit the federal, wherever we can get into. You know, and that's why we come out and we do these types of speaking engagements, because the more people that the legislators hear it from, the more likely they are to do something about it.
How about our new senator? Does he know anything about it?
Who's your new senator? Oh, yes, yes, he does, because he's from Newark. And Polaris has been doing a lot of work up in Newark.
What is he doing?
I don't work that far up, so you'd have to check with Polaris about that.
I think I know the answer.
Okay. So he needs to get more educated, huh?
Okay, what kind of training can you provide for everybody here or anybody there to put some teeth into this?
Putting teeth into it is there's so much, it's hard to explain because, right, advocating, educating, that's important. Okay, so getting out and talking to people about it, that's important. But people think that, you know, you get these kids and you rescue them and then you put them in therapy and they're going to be fine. No, no. You know, I've got a woman, she came, I'm a clinical director of a halfway house for men and women called Hendricks House and Hanson House. One of the women came up to me and she said, Miss Joni, I'm embarrassed to tell you this. She said, but I've only got one pair of underpants and I've been wearing the same pair for 4 months. She said, I wash them out every night, but now they're getting pretty rugged looking. So I said, what size do you wear? She looked at me like I was the stupidest person on this earth. She said, do you know how long it's been since I bought my own clothes? She said, I don't know what size I am. You know, they don't know. And getting them into therapy, that's so far down the line. Just getting them safe, getting them to believe that they're safe, their family's safe. You know, there's so much.
That's what I want to know. Do you provide that kind of training for all of us here or anybody else to get them safe?
No, that's done by Community Treatment Solutions is an agency that does foster parenting. And they're always looking for new foster parents that they can put these kids into safe houses with. But you have to go to them, to Community Treatment Solutions, they're right up in Morristown, and be trained as a treatment foster parent. And then you get licensed by DIFAS and you can help take these kids in.
It's hard to get a grip on something that's underground like it is. The fear of the child against them. I mean, they got all their everything, all their ducks in a row, these guys.
Yeah, they do.
They're not stupid. They're slick.
Let me tell you something. One of our kids was talking to a reporter, and he was found dead under the boardwalk. So the message got out to all of the kids, shut you down.
Yeah.
And they traced this kid back, they could trace back who the pimp was by a tattoo, right? So now the pimps use ink that you have to have a black light to see the tattoo. They are so far ahead of us.
That's why they're making money. That's how they know it.
Yeah.
They know.
Do you know, right now, human trafficking is the second most illegal, lucrative commodity. It used to be that it was firearms, drug abuse, drug trafficking, and then human trafficking. Well, now we're ahead of drug trafficking. Because once you sell a drug, you need money to buy more. If you sell a kid, you can resell and resell and resell.
It's good for about 15, 20 years before they're played out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily try to get murdered.
Right. Yes.
When the foster parents are certified, as I said, and trained, you know, you're dealing with kids with profound psychological damage, and how effective is just a little training course?
Well, all they're training you to do is how to keep the kids safe.
Okay.
They
Not
have
to deal with
therapists
the
who work,
psych-
no, they have therapists who work with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes,
What percentage of the victims are males?
I can only tell you that there was a university from New York that was coming into Atlantic City to talk to the kids, and they found there were 40% boys and 60% girls. That was in Atlantic City. Now, what it is nationally, I don't know. Because remember, this is the most under-reported. Nobody wants to report this, you know? So it's really hard to have accurate statistics. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks all for coming out tonight.